Godox, and today is a lovely day, a strangely warm fall day, and we're talking about the SmallRig Forevala W60, a funny name for a very pretty mic set. We are now living in a world where there are a lot of options for wireless audio. How do you choose? Well, SmallRig, I am sorry to say, is not taking pity on your indecisive mind, and they have come out with a new, apparently attractive option for wireless audio. Let's dive in deep and see how this compares to the competition. And I've got the competition here. And just so you know, this receiver pack right here is what is being used to record me. Got the wire running up to my camera, so this is all live. This is the audio you're hearing right from the SmallRig W60. We'll start with the categories, as always, with the build quality. So let's take a closer look at the transmitter here. We have just a very attractive design, which is almost refreshing. A lot of these are just whatever they need to be, but there's obviously a very considered design to make this as pretty as possible. We have the microphone unit here, looks very nice, has an aluminum screen on it. We have a full color LCD display on the back, just like the one on this receiver as well. And on the receiver, it's quite responsive. I think I might be peaking here. Let me turn it down a little bit. I see some red lines. Very responsive. Some mic kits I find that the user interface on them is very laggy. This one's quite snappy. You can really see what's going on here. Now the materials listed in their specs say aluminum with some ABS. This is clearly mostly ABS with some aluminum. I think these knobs are aluminum, but they're kind of wiggly. Thankfully there's a protector on the sides here because I would be afraid for the durability of this product. Also, if we look at the screen here, it's kind of a squishy plastic. And we'll be comparing that to some other stuff, and I'll tell you why I think that. But thankfully, this whole kit and caboodle can slide into their easy peasy charging case. Keeps it safe, keeps it secure. Charging case itself is a nice, slightly soft but durable plastic. So I say soft in that this is a plastic with some resiliency to it, so it's not going to like chip or shatter very easily. And the charging case itself has a built-in USB-A cable, which is nice, but mostly I use the USB-C on it. So if this cable were to break, you could still plug it in, no problem. This case is a little bit bigger than the most obvious competition for this, the Godox wireless kit. As you can see, from all dimensions, the Godox kit is a little bit smaller. But the reason for that is, well, all the devices in it are smaller. We have this beautiful receiver that, well, you can't even tell which one's which in the Godox kit, which is the receiver. That's not it. There it is. So the receiver is much smaller, less space to take up, but this one has the knobs on it, so that is our trade-off for size. Overall, I feel like this charging case could be a little bit smaller though, because it doesn't have a battery in it like, say, the Hollyland Lark charging case that will continue to charge even if it's not plugged in, and the Saramonic Blink 150 Pro, also an integrated charging case with a built-in battery. We'll talk more about that in a very soon future video. It's a nice, well-considered design, but I don't feel like it's incredibly rugged, so I'm going to give that a 7.5 out of 10 for build quality. I don't feel like it's going to unnecessarily fall apart or anything, but it's not exactly rough and tumble. Thankfully, there's this case to easily protect it and slip into a bag. Next up is feature set. This has some great features. The main feature for me is the easy user interface. Highly inspired, I have to say, by the Hollyland Lark user interface. Let me just boot this guy up here for a second. There are some very clear similarities between the Hollyland Lark and the SmallRig. We have the two knobs, we have the knob protectors. The knob protectors come out a little higher on the SmallRig, more protecting. See some similarities here. Now, as you can see, there is no USB-C on the Hollyland Lark receiver. So this one can be charged on its own, and it is smaller, and it is rated for a higher battery life. That is an interesting feature. The Hollyland Lark never really impressed me for battery life. You're looking at maybe in practical use a maximum about 2 hours, whereas this one is supposedly rated for 8 hours of battery life, which is a ridiculous claim. Now, I once used it for 4 hours straight, and yeah, it was still going strong. So perhaps that is right. I don't really have the time or capacity to test an 8-hour battery life claim on this, but that is impressive, and it might actually be close to being true. As far as the screens go, the screen on the SmallRig is a little bit nicer, and also the screen stays lit for a lot longer, whereas the Hollyland, you have to constantly be tapping a button or something to get it to brighten back up again, but I'm always afraid of what button I'm going to tap, because sometimes when I tap it I accidentally mute my microphone, and that's an issue. So overall, the Hollyland Lark feels more rigid in the hand, but I have to acknowledge they are very similar. The most obvious feature of this is the 2.4 gigahertz mic. I'm going to be comparing it all to 2.4 gigahertz systems. These are all 2.4 gig. It says it boasts a new improved audio processing processor, which has 48 kilohertz, 16-bit sampling, which a lot of the new ones have now. The Saramonic Blink 500 Pro X also includes that, and a claimed 81 dB signal-to-noise ratio, whereas something more standard like the Rode Wireless Go 2 only claims 67 dB, which seems like a pretty conservative estimate there. And as I mentioned before, a feature we're lacking, a battery in the charging case, and we're also lacking internal storage, which you get on the Rode Go 2 and on the DJI mic. So for a feature set, it's pretty complete, but we're only going to be able to get an 8 out of 10 because of the things that we're missing. Next up is sound quality. We have been listening to unedited sound from this mic, and before we move on, we have to open the box that this came in. And it also comes with some very run-of-the-mill microphones. These look very similar to the ones that came with the Godox kits, the Saramonic kit. Let's have a listen and see what it sounds like once we plug it all in together. There we go. Not a big fan of these capsules because they are quite large. The clip is enormous, and it's a little inconvenient the way the wire comes out the side of this. So you're going to be clipping it to yourself or sliding it into your pocket. It's coming out the side, or rather it come out of the top like a lot of them do. As you can see on the Godox kit here, you have the mic on the top, the plug on the top. Look at the Hollyland kit here, you have the mic on the top and the plug on the top. Not sure. What do you think of the capsule here? Does it sound as the same as the one that's in there? I feel like it is not quite as loud, but I'm not entirely sure. So as far as the audio quality goes, it's nothing special, but it's not bad either. It's super smooth, a little mid-heavy, but it's easily edited if you want to change the EQ on that. Now, usually I use a more expensive external microphone. I will use this Sennheiser condenser mic. Let's swap that out and see what it sounds like. Alright, there we go. I don't know, does that sound any different to you? Now the condenser mic has a slightly different volume response, I think. But you can compare the two. I generally prefer the sound of this. It's much more detailed than the one that comes with most of these mic kits. But I'm going to switch back now. And there we go. Okay, am I still peaking? I don't know. The one problem that I have with this is the output from the receiver is really, really low. I've got to crank my camera right up to get this to work well. So I have like peaking audio on my input here, but the audio into my camera is really, really low level. You got to crank that up, you got to boost it. I'm not sure why that is. When I use the Rode, when I use the Hollyland, I have the input on my camera set to like 3 or 4, whereas for this one, I've got to crank that input all the way up to like 15, which is weird because something that boasts such a high signal-to-noise ratio, you're going to lose a lot of that because it's amplifying at such a low level. So that's the only real problem that I have with this. So let me know what you think about the audio quality. That's a very subjective thing. Some people look for different things in the audio spectrum, depends on your speakers and your ears. But for me, I give it about an 8 out of 10. Usability. That's where this design comes really handy. It is super easy to interface with this device. You have 2 wheels, 2 buttons. The volume control is great. When you put this on top of your camera, you're looking right at the display, which is staying lit. You can see it's staying lit, which makes it crazy easy to use. Whereas the Hollyland, it dims out. One of the more standard ones, like say the Saramonic or the Godox, when you're looking at your camera, you're seeing the back of this thing. You got to look at the top of the camera. Not convenient at all. Whereas with this one, this design, so much easier to use, very simple, very quick to change volume settings. In other things like the Saramonic, you got to go into the menu to change the volume, when sometimes you got to change that a lot to keep on top of things. Additional wins for usability, you've got 2.4 gigahertz, which is super easy for pairing. And as I said before, there's a USB-C port on all of these, plus you can use the charging case, either or, do what you want. Most important thing when it comes to usability is our reception. We're going to go outside and test how much their claim of 100 meters of range actually holds out in the real world. Let's see. Okay, it's time for a test comparing the SmallRig wireless setup to the Saramonic Blink 500 Pro. So I have one on each shoulder. They're both 2.4 gigahertz transmitters, and we'll see how they get along with each other. Now, one might observe that perhaps they'll be interfering with one another, but that's kind of the point. I'm out in the middle of nowhere here where there is absolutely no cellular or wireless interference whatsoever. If any interference is created, it's just from the two of them. Very light interference. If they can't frequency hop, then that's their own problem, to be perfectly honest. So we're going to do our range test here. We're going to compare the video quality between, we have A7 IV with the iPhone 11 Pro. Both have a 24mm equivalent lens. Right now we're shooting with an ND8 plus a 1/8 black mist filter on the A7 IV, just to make things look just a little bit nicer. Let's get our range test going and see how we do. Obviously, we shouldn't have any cutouts at this distance. They're both rated for about 100 meters of distance. Now, we have the SmallRig going into the A7 IV and the Saramonic going into the iPhone. So we shouldn't be comparing audio quality at this point, just reception. Because the iPhone on its audio input does a lot of funky automatic stuff, and so I can't guarantee that it's going to have the right stuff to sound the same. All right, here we are about 25 meters away. Gonna take a little turn, take a little turn, take a little turn. I don't know if anything cut out, we'll find out later. We're gonna get a little further away here. I doubt we'll get to a full 100 meters because honestly, none of these ones that claim 100 meters actually get that far, which is pretty disappointing. All right, you can still see over there. Now we have a few trees in the way. I'm going to take a little turn. We are about 50 meters away now, and I turned around once. I continue down the path. I don't even know if I'm still on camera at this point. Now we're about 75 meters away. Getting a little uncomfortable with leaving my camera and my phone in the woods this far. Okay, so we have trees in the way. If I turn around this way with trees in the way, and then if I go over here, we have direct line of sight still. Take another turn at 75 meters away. And then I'm going to continue on. Sure, let's do it. About 100 meters away. All right, there we go. I still mostly have line of sight to the camera, even if you can't see me, and I'm turning around right now. And I'm going to walk back by the tree line, so I still have some tree interference. The trees aren't exactly thick, they're a little bit sparse, but we'll see how they did. And I'm just going to keep babbling on here. So the Saramonic and the SmallRig are very different rigs, physically speaking. The SmallRig takes on the design. It appears to be very similar to the Lark 150 from Hollyland. You've got the knobs in the back, whereas the Saramonic is a little bit more old-fashioned in that you gotta press buttons to get into the menu. You don't have like knobs and stuff to like physically control everything. which I've really come to expect and to enjoy using. We're almost back here. And honestly, most of the time using mics like this, you're not going to be that far away. That's kind of crazy. Although sometimes I'll use mics at a distance when I'm, say, filming a wedding. I want to get that camera out of the way so it's not distracting to the guests. And one interesting thing about the iPhone 14 Pro, we have a larger sensor with a nice large aperture, and so we get a slightly shallow depth of field. Now obviously it's not quite the same as our 24 1.8 lens here from Viltrox. It's not as shallow, but if I get real close to this iPhone, it actually has some very natural fall off. And this isn't in portrait or cinematic mode. This is just the lens itself producing that kind of look. And at f1.8 on our Viltrox lens, not quite the same. Still a lot more shallow. Stop it down a little bit. It's going to look a little more similar to f2.8 here. How's it look? How did it sound? Well, we'll find out when we get back to the edit. Back to US. Wow, I'm actually quite impressed. No 2.4 gigahertz system that I've used thus far has actually even come remotely close to hitting the claimed 100 meters of range, which they all claim for the most part. So this one pretty much nails it. Nice. So negatives for usability would be no internal storage for backup and redundancy. It's a little bit larger and heavier than some of the competition. As you can see, it's significantly larger than the Hollyland and just a bit larger than the Godox. I don't know if I'm creating interference by putting all those next to each other. It doesn't automatically go into standby when you pop it in the charging case like the Hollyland does. That's pretty convenient. When you're done with the Hollyland, you just plunk it in the case, you're done. This one, you actually have to turn it off manually. So overall though, for usability, these designs are just dead simple to use. I've got to give that a 9 out of 10. Last up is value, as always. Let's see how this stacks up. It's new, it's shiny. Maybe it costs too much. So we have the W60 from SmallRig is $200. That's a surprising price point, honestly, because let's see what it compares to. The cheapest you can do and still have reliable signal is the 7Rims iRay. This kit is 150 bucks. It's UHF, but it does a phenomenal job for the price point. Build quality is not quite there, not exactly a slick system by any means, and no charging case. But if we look at more direct competitors, this is the same price, $200, as the Godox Movelink M2 Compact. But this lacks the easy user interface, has less battery life. We also have the aforementioned brand new Saramonic Blink 500 Pro X. This system is $300. It's 50% more. We still have the Hollyland Lark 150. This came out more expensive, but now the price has dropped to $280. It does have the built-in battery, but that's still a lot more money. We also have the Rode Wireless Go 2 kit, where you have the mics and the 2 transmitters, so that's all that stuff together, $414. It's getting a bit rich these days. And the DJI mic, as I mentioned before, is $330. You have a charging case, you get all of that stuff included as well. But it doesn't have screens on the transmitters. So overall, that's phenomenal. I mean, you could do wireless audio for less, but not with all these features. I have to give this a 9 out of 10 for value. $200 is an incredibly compelling price point. So what does that give us for a total? That gives us a total of 41.5 out of 50, or 83%. That is a very high score. This is a serious contender. If you like the audio that you're hearing here, let me know what you think about the SmallRig Forevala, I don't know what that word is, W60, down in the comments below. If you have any questions about it, I'll get back to you on that as well. And soon we're going to be looking at the Saramonic Blink 500 Pro X. That's a lot of letters, but they've been in the game for a little longer than SmallRig, so they have a lot of products to differentiate. So, until next time, let's go make some videos.